Hello there, welcome back to Planet America's Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and yes, we have a situation.
The growing scandal threatening Democrats' best shot at taking back the Senate.
New allegations of inappropriate conduct.
Everything that he's done is fraudulent.
Courts claimed Platner sent sexually explicit messages to women while married. He's also faced questions about his tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol.
Mounting scandals threaten to derail an insurgent campaign and could cost Democrats a Senate majority.
And a rare Republican revolt sees Trump walk away from his slush fund. Still, wants to keep his get-out-of-jail card. But first...
When Graham Platner announced that he was running to become the Democratic nominee for Senator from Maine, he seemed almost too good to be true.
A decade of military service going overseas, farming oysters to feed my community, diving to lend a hand to other fishermen, trying to start a family. But everywhere I've gone, it seems like the fabric of what holds us together is being ripped apart by billionaires and corrupt politicians.
Graham Platner looked and sounded like the kind of white working-class male who had supported the Democratic Party for decades but had been won over to the Republican side by Donald Trump's brand of populism and patriotism. And in his bid to unseat Republican Susan Collins and potentially claim a Senate majority for Democrats, Platner had the backing of progressive Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and he seemed to echo much of Bernie's message.
It is thousands of people across Maine, millions across America, acting together, creating a movement too powerful for money to buy.
Rivals and journalists wanted to know more about the 41-year-old political newcomer and his past. And the more they dug, the more they found.
A man strips down at his brother's wedding reception. Wearing only his underwear, he rocks out to the Miley Cyrus hit Wrecking Ball.
But a grown man in his undies singing along to Miley Cyrus wasn't the scandal.
He ended up taking off his shirt, which revealed a chest tattoo that's raising a lot of eyebrows.
And here's that tattoo. A skull and crossbones resembling what's known in German as a Totenkopf, or death's head. An image which was adopted by Hitler's Nazi SS in World War II, and according to the Anti-Defamation League, has been a common hate symbol since. Platner says he got that tattoo when he was still a Marine and he did not understand its history.
We got very inebriated and we did what Marines on liberty do, and we decided to go get a tattoo. And we went to a tattoo parlor in Split, Croatia, and we chose a terrifying looking skull and crossbones off the wall because we were Marines, and, you know, skulls and crossbones are a pretty standard military thing.
In particular, a German military thing, but still, voters in Maine didn't seem to care. And they were similarly sanguine about old posts from Platner's social media feeds where he referred to himself as a communist, criticised police, and called rural white Americans racist and stupid.
In other posts from 2013, he minimized challenges faced by service members in reporting sexual assault, writing, quote, "You make a choice to consume enough of a substance to lose your self-control. So if you don't want to be in a compromising situation, act like an adult for F's sake."
His Democratic primary opponent, Maine's 78-year-old Governor Janet Mills, tried to capitalise on all of that.
Did you know Graham Platner wrote that women worried about rape need to, quote,
not get so up they wind up having sex with someone they don't mean to.
It's disgusting.
Platner wrote to avoid rape, women should, quote,
act like an adult for sake.
Graham Platner, seriously. We blame the victim? That's a horrible thing to say. Disqualifying. I have not seen this. He's a bully. This guy gives off a vibe.
Platner disavowed those earlier statements, saying that they are the result of post-traumatic stress disorder and a deep disillusionment following his military service.
It shows the arc of a journey that I've gone through. I'm proud of the person I am today. I'm not proud of the person I always was, but I also don't get to be who I am today without that journey.
And polls still showed Platner far ahead of Mills, and last month she suspended her campaign. So maybe Trump changed the rules. If you seem authentic, your flaws can be forgiven. But then last week, a new controversy, a much more recent one.
Platner admitted that he exchanged sexually explicit texts with other women while married to his wife, Amy Gertner.
Gertner had confided in Platner's then political director about the sexting at the start of his campaign last year. And a week ago, she posted this video accusing his rivals and the media of trying to destroy her husband's campaign.
I don't want a perfect marriage. I want my marriage. I knew the man that I married had been through an immense amount of violent, active combat. And he's been in therapy for years. I admire the fuck out of him.
With all that going on, some Democrats were getting pretty nervous. Platner met with a group of them, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who then seemed to be leaving the door open to switching his support back to his original pick, Janet Mills.
I met with Graham Platner today. We're going to beat Susan Collins and take back the Senate.
You're standing behind Graham Platner, the leader here?
We're going to beat Susan Collins and take back the Senate.
Hardly a ringing endorsement, and that's pretty much all Chuck would say. Governor Mills then helpfully pointed out that while she's suspended active campaigning, she is still on the ballot for this week's primary. And then the New York Times tracked down a number of ex-girlfriends of Graham Platner. Some said that he was fun and caring, while others described volatile and toxic relationships that were unsettling. One of those exes was Lindsay Fifield, described by the Times as a Virginia conservative who's worked for right-leaning groups and Republican campaigns. She said Mr. Platner's insistence that he did not know his tattoo was a Nazi symbol until it became a campaign issue last year was simply not true, and that Platner could be rough with her, particularly when they were drinking, leaving her shaken and sometimes afraid. Platner appeared on left-wing MS Now to reject those claims.
There are some allegations in this piece that I just want to be kind of unequivocal about are simply not true. Anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew what my tattoo was, these are the statements of someone who's politically motivated.
Platner was then asked by the host, Chris Hayes, about those sexually explicit text messages.
At the beginning of our marriage, I made mistakes, and Amy held me accountable for them, and we worked through them, and the work that we did made our marriage significantly stronger. And who we are today is an incredibly faithful and happy married couple.
Well, needless to say, it's now open season on Graham Platner's past. This week we saw a story about yet another deleted Reddit post involving this photo here. Graham Platner supposedly wrote something like, "German helmets and a Browning automatic rifle. What a cool pic. Scandal!" And this story here about a barroom patron who claimed Graham Platner was a deeply unpleasant barkeep. Platner was just kind of dark, he said. You try to turn up a little conversation, he wouldn't give anything back. No smile, no acknowledgement, just nothing coming back that was friendly and warm. Scandal! That writer, by the way, Wayne Lagerson, was described by the New York Post as an independent journalist and strategic communications and policy consultant. But Lagerson described himself as a conservative libertarian. Go figure. Okay, so those two are both lame. But on the other hand, you had left-wing populists like Cenk Uygur saying these scandals reflected the establishment's hatred for real people who aren't corrupted by the system. They never go after insiders like this because they're already good boys and girls who do exactly as they're told. I'm sure Bill Clinton would be surprised to hear the scandal sheets don't go after insiders. And other Platner supporters came for the New York Times journalist who co-wrote both those articles, Katie Gluck, writing things like, the New York Times journalist who wrote this hit piece was co-president of her Students for Israel chapter in college. Now, I don't think we know what her actual views on Israel are, but I don't know what they'd have to do with her reporting on major political scandals. Regardless, my point is, Platner still has his defenders. In fact, Platner raised $200,000 the day after the latest scandal, his single best fundraising day in this phase of the campaign. But look, let's put the stands and the haters to one side. These two stories this week created a lot of potential, real problems for Platner's campaign. For instance, Platner wasn't texting these women through a phone network. he was using an app called Kik. This was his profile here. Look at that photo. Not a good start, especially given back in 2017, a little after Platner first joined Kik, Forbes magazine wrote about how Kik had an astonishing level of illegal content and how there was evidence of a vast number of child exploitation cases. In fact, at the time Platner was texting those women, about 70% of Kik's clientele were between the ages of 13 and 24. Platner was about 40. That's why Chris Hayes asked Platner this.
The people you were texting with, whatever that was, in whatever context they were adult women, you knew that, and it was consensual. Is that true?
Yes.
And you have that you confirm that. You knew their age.
Yes. Oh, God. I mean, yeah. Yes, of course.
It's possible we'll be playing you that clip again in the months to come. And then there was the fact that it wasn't just 1 or 2 women that Platner was texting, it was 6 women while he was a newlywed and around the time his wife was undergoing fertility treatments. Although we don't know exactly when this texting happened because all his campaign said was that the conduct stopped before his campaign launched late last year. Quite vague, don't you think? Chris Hayes tried to nail down that detail as well.
When did it stop?
Oh, it stopped when it was happening. I mean, like it was Amy and I, it happened soon after we got married. And we dealt with it very, very early in our relationship. And so that's when it stopped.
It's funny, don't you think, how Platner doesn't seem to want us to know exactly when he stopped texting those women. It's almost like the answer is quite recent. And the reason this matters is because until now, Platner's narrative has been, I used to be screwed up and did all kinds of dubious things, but now I'm better. So a story about him sexting 6 different women potentially last year completely undermines his explanations for everything. Also noteworthy is how slippery Platner's been about this whole texting story.
But the stories are true, right? About the texts?
No. This is the amazing part. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times ran stories without any evidence besides the gossip from a former staffer. I'm sorry, that's frankly journalistic malpractice. We pushed back on it, they won it, they did it anyways.
Renata, do you have a question? So are you confirming that the messages did not exist?
What's that?
The messages, they did not?
I'm confirming that what Genevieve McDonald said in the New York Times is not true.
You see, that sounds like a denial to me, but apparently it's not. Platner's campaign said, Graham isn't saying the texts to other women at the start of the marriage are not real. They are. He's frustrated by the sensationalisation of several private facts relayed by a former Confidante journalist. Sure, that's what he's saying. And then there's the second story where Platner's girlfriend from over 10 years ago, Lindsay Fifield, not only said Platner knew he had a Nazi tattoo back then, but he's the one who taught her that it was called a Totenkopf a decade ago. Now, John already played Platner's denial of all this, but here's the thing, Fifield has evidence. In a private chat group in August last year, 2 months before Platner says he found out it was a Nazi tattoo and then he had it covered up, Fifield has screen caps of her telling friends that Platner has a Nazi tattoo on his chest, and she even called it a Totenkopf in the screen caps. Now, this wasn't public at that point in time, and Fifield hadn't seen Platner's chest for a decade. So how could she possibly know all that information and Platner himself did not know it? Chris Hayes asked Platner.
How does she know it's a Nazi tattoo in August of last year and you don't know it's a Nazi tattoo in August of last year?
Well, she certainly didn't send that text to me. So whoever she sent it to and was talking to, that's, I can't say why, but I will say that I certainly didn't know. And the text messages she's sending to friends who may have recognized it, they didn't tell me that, so.
You make up your own mind whether you believe him. But it gets worse, because Fifield had some disturbing stories about Platner, like how he once twisted her arm behind her back, shoved her into a bedroom and held the door closed from the other side so she couldn't get out. Now, Platner strongly disputes any claims of physical intimidation or altercations, and the New York Times says they couldn't independently corroborate Fifield's account. Fair enough, except Fifield later responded on Twitter with, "Why does it say nobody could corroborate when I offered them sources that could corroborate? Where were the screenshots they said they would use? Or the mention that I'd supported local Democrats and that most of my family and husband are Liberal?" The Times also failed to include any mention that I did confide in multiple friends through the years that Graham had been abusive long before he was running for office. Now, maybe she's lying. Maybe she is a political operative and the New York Times found her supposed evidence shoddy. Something tells me we're going to have the chance to make up our own minds about her evidence real soon. And finally, Fifield wrote about how the New York Times connected her with two of the other victims, and it left her asking, where are the stories from the other women? Where are their accusations of sexual assault? Why am I the focus? See, it sounds like at least one of those women claims Platner sexually assaulted her. Once again, we'll know if that's the case soon enough. Two more numbers for you, John, at the end of all this. First of all, 7. That's the number of points that Platner is still ahead of Susan Collins, according to the Real Clear Politics polling average, despite all this dirt on him. That may have changed this week, though. Secondly, the big number, 35. That's the number of days left before the Democrats are stuck with Platner. Yes, the primary is tomorrow, but the Democrats can still replace their candidate with anybody, all the way up to July 13. So that's going to be a tense 5 weeks for Graham Platner.
Yeah, and the Democrats as well. This controversy is certainly causing a lot of debate within Democratic Party ranks, and also accusations from Republicans that the Democrats are being hypocritical given their past attacks on President Trump's behaviour. For more on all of this, we spoke to Democratic strategist Julie Roginsky. Julie Roginsky, welcome back to the program. In your view, has anything that's come out about Graham Platner so far become in and of itself disqualifying, or is this really about the concern that there is more out there?
Look, I think having a Nazi tattoo on your chest is already politically disqualifying. Obviously, the Democratic voters of Maine don't agree with me, but we'll see what happens in a few months. And I continue to be concerned as a Democrat who obviously wants Democrats to regain control of the Senate, that there are more shoes to drop. It's not just the Nazi tattoo, which he's ascribed to being young and having PTSD. It's not just the way he treated women a decade or more ago, which he attributed to being young and having PTSD. It's not just the weird Reddit comments, which he attributed to being young and having PTSD, but it's also the new stuff coming out about his strange text messages with other women when he got married. Personally, I don't care about that. That's between Mrs. Platner and him. But having said that, I think it's just of concern that there may be more shoes to drop with this guy.
Julie, it sounds like you've got personal concerns with at least some of the stories that have come out about Platner. Is there one in particular that bothers you?
Look, I think it's a whole host of these issues that keep coming up and up and up. If you have a Nazi tattoo on your chest, I find that disqualifying. I don't care what else you've done in your life. I don't care if you've cured cancer, if you are somebody who decides to put a Totenkopf on your chest. I think that's disqualifying. On the other hand, it's difficult for me, and I've thought about this quite a bit, because the way the American system works, obviously, is that senators get to vote for majority leaders, and majority leaders get to determine the agenda, and of course, the Supreme Court, and potential more retirements coming up. It's important to have a Democratic Senate for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is the Supreme Court. And so it is putting Democrats into a really untenable, very difficult position, which is that we are supposed to weigh discomfort with these kinds of things, and of which there are many, with the notion of wanting Democrats to control the Senate, because if they don't, God forbid what else Donald Trump is going to ram through in the last 2 years, I hope the last 2 years of his administration. Very, very, very disappointing to have to face that kind of choice. It reminds me a lot of the choices Republicans had to make with Trump, where they made allowances for him in 2016, saying, yes, he grabbed women by the, by their genitalia. Yes, he's a horrible, immoral person who's screwed over everybody he's ever worked with, but at least he's not Hillary Clinton, right? And now we're being put in this kind of position with Platner. It's tragic that in a state like Maine, I worked in Maine. It was the very first place I ever did a campaign 30 years ago this year, actually, of all the wonderful people in Maine, that this is the choice that we've been given.
This, Julie, surely is indicative of some kind of political skill. The great politicians shift what is permissible and possible. Scandals that destroyed Gary Hart in 1988 did not destroy Bill Clinton just 4 years later. That comes down to the candidate, doesn't it?
Oh, no question about it. It's shifted. And I think people are more likely to forgive and maybe even reward. You saw that with Donald Trump also, some of these foibles, because what people are looking for right now is authenticity, right? They're looking for somebody who's not this polished consultant, overly produced, overly media trained candidate. Somebody who's media trained, I don't know how many candidates over the course of my life. I no longer do it for that reason. My whole point now is just go speak however you want to speak and be whoever you are, and don't let me get in your way. I think that's what people are looking for at the moment. Bill Clinton, of course, was wonderful at that in his own way back in 1992. Donald Trump is beyond talented at that this time around. And of course, you have people on both sides of the aisle, including people like John Fetterman and Graham Platner, who are very, very good at it.
Julie, why does morality matter in politics at all? If Graham Platner becomes a senator, he's going to be voting yes or no for policy questions, for the budget, for Medicare for all, or he won't. Why should morality matter? Could this be a positive development in politics, that morality doesn't matter anymore?
You know, that's an excellent question. And I will say that there's a big difference between personal morality, as in Graham Platner was sexting with women who are not his wife. I could not care less, in the same way that I could not care less if Donald Trump was cheating on Melania Trump. That is between Donald Trump and Melania. And if Graham Platner is cheating on his wife, that is between the two of them. I didn't care what Bill Clinton was doing, as long as it was consensual. Like, don't care. So that kind of morality, let's put aside. I think it's a very kind of uniquely maybe American puritanical viewpoint that I think the rest of the world looks at us and says, are you kidding me? They kind of look at us laughing about it. But there's a big difference between that and a Nazi tattoo. Because if you have a Nazi tattoo, you have a certain worldview that affects the rest of us. Don't care whether Donald Trump cheated on his wife, care very much that he thought there were good people on both sides during the Unite the Right rally when white nationalists were walking with tiki torches through the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia back in 2018. A woman died who was a protester, and Donald Trump said, there are good people on both sides. Like, that starts to impact the rest of us. It's not just about him and his wife and his family and however he treats them. That's how I would delineate your excellent question about what matters and what doesn't, at least to me personally.
Julie Roginsky, thanks for being with us on Planet America.
Anytime.
The race to replace term-limited Democrat Gavin Newsom as California governor next year was also upended by scandal. In April, frontrunner Eric Swalwell was accused by several women of sexual misconduct, including rape. He denied the claims while admitting to mistakes.
I've certainly made mistakes in judgment in my past, but those mistakes are between me and my wife. And to her, I apologize deeply for putting her in this position.
At that time, the former California Attorney General and Joe Biden's Health and Human Services Secretary, Javier Becerra, was down in the low single digits in polls. But after Swalwell ended his campaign, Becerra gathered up many of his supporters to become the first through to November's general election following last week's open primary, a primary where the top two progress regardless of their party affiliation.
Because we know the true miracle of democracy is this. After all the exhausting ads are run, the pundits are spun, and the billionaires try to buy their way in, it's the people, only the people, who get the last word.
That reference to billionaires was a dig at Becerra's main Democratic rival, the former hedge fund manager and activist Tom Steyer, who reportedly spent or booked more than $195 million worth of ads during his California campaign. Competing with Steyer for that second general election spot is Republican Steve Hilton. He's a former British political advisor and Fox News host who won the backing of President Trump. Californians, though, mostly vote by mail, meaning these results are coming through very, very slowly. And back at the White House, the president has been getting impatient, alleging foul play.
Look what's happening in California. The Democrats, right before our very eyes, are stealing the vote.
There was no evidence given to support that now familiar claim, The Trump-appointed US Attorney for Los Angeles, though, then announced multiple election fraud investigations. And as counting continues slowly, Steyer is gaining ground on Hilton for that second spot, but maybe not enough. And because Democrats far outnumber Republicans in California, Becerra is almost certain to beat Steve Hilton. If he wins through to the general, Becerra also has an edge over Tom Steyer too in polling, but that would be a much more expensive head-to-head contest if it pans out that way. Last month, the acting US Attorney General Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, announced a surprising settlement in a $10 billion lawsuit brought by Trump against the IRS, America's tax office, an anti-weaponisation fund to provide, according to the Justice Department, a systematic process to hear and redress claims of others who suffered weaponisation and lawfare.
If an individual wants to apply and assert that they were a victim of weaponization, and the commission can do anything according to what was set up yesterday, from issuing an apology to the claimant to awarding compensation and the monetary compensation.
That was immediately condemned by Democrats and some Republicans like Senator Tom Tillis as a slush fund to reward President Trump's supporters, including those who attacked the US Capitol building on January 6, 2021.
This is just stupid on stilts.
Well, this week came a pretty abrupt about-face.
Look, we're not moving forward with the fund.
OK, that seemed crystal clear, until reporters asked the president about it.
Is the $1.8 billion DOJ fund dead, or is it on hold?
It's, I'd have to ask the lawyers, I don't know. I know one thing, the weaponization.
But what's your
Are you
decision
talking about the weaponization fund?
Yeah, what's your decision?
The weaponization fund, as far as I'm concerned, was a beautiful thing.
That led to a bit more confusion over the fund's future, until the Justice Department advised two federal judges that cases challenging President Trump's anti-weaponisation fund are moot, because the administration, they said, had abandoned the program. But while Trump's supporters won't be able to cash in on this settlement, Trump and his family still can. Acting Attorney General Blanche confirming the administration is keeping the rest of the deal, shielding Mr. Trump from audits of tax returns he and his family have already filed. That's nice of Mr. Trump's own Justice Department to do that for him, given that he was facing a potential tax bill in the tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dollars. And Todd Blanche's reward? He's now been nominated to become the actual Attorney General, not just acting AG. So that's nice too.
Yeah, congrats, Todd. Although, John, I'm not exactly sure how dropping the slush fund is actually supposed to work, given the settlement explicitly said they shall establish the fund. Not they can if they want to. It's supposed to be a legal obligation, theoretically. By contrast, that audit shield provision you mentioned that they do want to keep, well, that was issued after the settlement agreement was signed. So theoretically, that provision is of no legal effect whatsoever. It doesn't even pretend that it modifies the original settlement agreement. So what is the audit shield provision's legal basis for existing? I got no idea. Even weirder, the provision is about the IRS, yeah? It's about the IRS not auditing the president.
Yes.
Yeah. But it was only signed by the Attorney General, not by the IRS. So how can the Attorney General force the IRS to not conduct audits when the Attorney General has nothing to do with the IRS? Todd Blanche has waved away all of these concerns. He says anytime the IRS settles with someone, it's standard and typical to get rid of past ongoing audits. And maybe so, if the lawsuit is about those people paying their taxes. But in this case, the lawsuit is about leaking of information. Got nothing to do with audits at all. By contrast, what this might trigger is Section 7217 of the Internal Revenue Code that says it's a crime for the president to request that the IRS terminate any ongoing audit or investigation. That could well mean that this whole audit provision is just simply unenforceable, and that would be quite important to know, because this isn't just about presidential audits. The provision protects the president, his trusts, his family, his companies, his affiliates and his subsidiaries, and it protects them from any matters that are pending or could be pending before the IRS, or in fact, any government agency or department. Now that includes the Department of Justice. So this is effectively a self-pardon for the president and all his buddies for any crime at all up until now. However, the court cases you referred to before are actually still continuing. So I am eager to see what they conclude. In the meantime, Ivanka Trump has sparked days of protest in Albania when she casually mentioned that she and her husband Jared Kushner were developing a new exclusive island resort. Who could have known that a new private island involving the Trump family could be so controversial?
Epstein Island almost destroyed her father's presidency, but Ivanka Trump still had a dream. Did someone say new private island?
An unbelievable, beautiful 1,400-hectare private island.
It's isolated.
We were on a friend's boat. Effectively, that's how we found it.
It's dark.
There's no power on this island.
And there's no cell phones in the shower.
They don't have their cell phone in the shower.
So this time,
there will be no compromise.
No one will get compromised.
That I conceived alongside many other talented people.
Conceive alongside many other talented people.
Everybody thinks I have a fetish for old people.
Well, that's better than at the last island. Trump Island. It's an orgy for your senses.
Definitely not affiliated with any other island.
Now, before we go, we covered President Trump's trip to China a few weeks ago, and images we showed to illustrate what some analysts saw as Trump's overly deferential, even obsequious tone was a picture of Trump bowing as he was shaking hands with President Xi. Well, fact checkers have since concluded that that image may have been manipulated, although AI detection tools did not return conclusive results. But in light of those doubts, we have removed it from the online version of the program. And that is it for another trip to Planet America.
We'll be seeing you on ABC TV at the same time next week, or on iView or online. And you can also find the Pet Podcast there, where this week we talk a lot more about a certain guy from Maine. See you later. Bye-bye.